Welcome to City Cinematheque, where the art and pleasure of the movies are the subject of serious discussion. I'm your host, Jerry Carlson, and I teach film studies at the City College of the City University of New York. Today, as part of our glance at innovation in early sound film in the United States, we're going to be looking at the 1934 production, Our Daily Bread, written and directed by King Vidor. This is a story of an urban couple who go back to the land and actually create a cooperative there. It's a major film visually and in its use of sound, and it's also an incredible document of Depression-era America. We'll be talking about that and other things after today's screening with Christopher Sherritt, a noted expert on the relationship between American movies and American society. Now, go back to Depression-era America in Our Daily Bread. Welcome back to City Cinematheque. I hope you've enjoyed this opportunity to see what's a major film from Depression-era America and something a bit rare from that particular era. It's a film that was actually independently produced. It's a very rich film in terms of its social vision, in terms of the way it's been received, and also formally from a master of American cinema, King Vidor. To talk about that over the next 30 minutes, it's a pleasure to finally welcome to City Cinematheque a longtime friend, Christopher Sherritt. Chris is a professor emeritus of film studies at Seton Hall University. He's the author or editor of 6 books. Many people have perhaps read some of his essays in Cineast or Film International. Among those books is a very important anthology on horror, Planks of Reason. And he's also been a pioneer in the study of American television with 2 monographs, one on The Rifleman, for all of us of a certain generation, and for everybody else, Breaking Bad. Pleasure to have you here, Chris.
Thank you, Jerry.
Great, great. So I was just saying this is a Depression-era film. I mean, its setting is contemporary, 1934. But what else do you think makes it? I mean, we were talking about this a little bit beforehand. Makes it a Depression-era film in so many ways?
Well, it starts with the opening shot, I guess, that shows the landlord coming up to take the rent from them. And it's this very drab walk-up staircase. And so that's the city. Yeah. It's almost, the film is sometimes seen as a sequel to The Crowd, which is his urban film.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about The Crowd for people who haven't seen it.
Well, it's about John and Mary, the same couple, not the same actors, but the same couple who try to find identity and prosperity in the big city. The final shot is of the crowd, a massive, it's an incredible Vidorian crowd shot. You know, he's also known for crowds in other films like The Big Parade, and so shooting people who are somewhat alienated or doomed even is part of his earlier style. And later on too, in the big films like Duel in the Sun, you know, where you get a cast of thousands, literally, including some major stars in odd roles. But anyway, in
The Crowd,
The Crowd, you end up with young people being sucked up into the alienated world of the big city. In this film, Our Daily Bread, the same couple with other actors are in the city yet, and they're about to be kicked out of their building.
Right, absolutely.
But then the kindly uncle, who is swathed in cigar smoke, you know, he's sort of like demonic, but he says, I've got a piece of worthless property you can have God knows where out in the desert. So, and that begins migration out to you know, greener pastures, so to speak,
absolutely.
which aren't that green at first because nobody knows a thing about farming. And that introduces the idea of the Depression and people trying to find work, and under John and Mary, especially John. I mean, this is a story of the great man, who is helped by a simpler man with common sense. That's the character played by John Qualen, Chris, yeah. And he is known for John Ford's work, I would say. He shows up in The Grapes of Wrath, which is a much more downbeat film. There's no happy ending there, folks, but it's a wonderful picture. This picture is, it shows the hopelessness of the Great Depression, in the sense that there are these shots of sand, not dirt, but just sand, you know, until somebody who knows something concerning farming, which is actually Chris, helps them out. And it's also the story of a commune.
Right,
you know?
exactly.
And this is the way the film changes its meaning over time. I mean, back in the day, it was shown in the Soviet Union, and the Soviets said, oh, it's a good progressive film, not much to it, you know, but it's okay. It was also shown to Hitler, and they said, well, it's a nice film about nice people. But in the 60s, my generation said, well, this is how we have a commune. This is like a nice hippie commune. But it's a film that shows how people can triumph over the elements and triumph over adversity, even the Great Depression. Many people have argued that there is no political program here. It was supportive of FDR and the New Deal, but it's not a very practical answer to that. I mean, there were programs under FDR, like the CCC camps, Civilian Conservation Corps. My father was in one, that were practical. When it comes down to it, I mean, the only way out of the Great Depression was World War II.
Yeah.
I mean, the programs of FDR helped a lot in terms of morale, but they weren't all that productive for the country, you know.
Yeah. Well, this is, you know, this is this kind of optimistic, lyrical response that I think also goes back. You know, they are cast out of the city. I mean, they take this opportunity, but they're being pushed out of the city. So, you know, this is a film that's shot on location. It has all of this cast that you're talking about, but at the same time, it is a kind of mythological film. You know, it's as if they get a second chance, and they can refound America in some way, because
the new golden land, which
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you could say that it's not about the Great Depression and the economic deprivations, you know, thereof. It's a melodrama.
Yeah.
Which is what he was known for, really, Vidor. But it's a story of boy and girl, John and Mary, you know. And it's Mary who sees the bud come up out of the ground, and the shadow is a cross. Yeah. And John says, I think we are being watched over, looked over. And the Lord's Prayer in the title. Right. Although there was the alternative title, which is Hell's Crossroads. And it was shown that way for a little while. I thought, why would you do that?
Why would you? Yeah.
You know, but it's not hell. But it's John and Mary, and that hallowed construct is violated with Sally, who's the blonde bombshell. Right. She's the sex kitten. Right. I always think of Sunrise, Murnau's expressionist import to Hollywood, you know, with a city girl, the sexualized, you know, woman, versus the saintly Madonna type figure. Mary isn't a mother, but she has that quality. I mean, she's a good woman. Right. And the tramp almost ruins the whole thing, you know. And John loses his sense until Mary brings him back, you know, in a little bit. And I'm going to point out, I'm in complete agreement with him. I'm also point out how
the music choices in the film,
Yeah.
you know, really kind of underline that, because, you know, when they're celebrating the fact that they've had their first, the community is now working, etc., what do they sing? They sing songs that I was taught in elementary
Yeah.
school, for sure, but they're singing Camptown Races.
Camptown Races.
You know, etc. But the reference is, you know, coming back to my point, is that let's go back to this foundational conquest, you know, of the 19th century, you know, of this, and we can do that.
Yeah.
We can do that again, and of course, she's the person who has her 78s
Yeah.
and her wind up, and she's playing hot jazz from the city.
Yeah. Which is kind of like a degraded, degenerate, you know, form, really. I mean, in the context of the Bible and the prayer, the Lord's Prayer,
Absolutely.
you know. But yeah, sure, she does that.
Yeah. No, and you know, that's one of the ways in which he'll, you know, sets up these oppositions and sets up this kind of ongoing thing of, okay, now what's going to be the next problem? Because because the film does follow in one sense, you know, a classic structure of almost each act of the film, if you want to divide it that way, is a big problem that gets solved in some way, and then another big problem.
American ingenuity triumphs, you know, and there is this, you know, give and take. Like, if you build me a frame for my house, I'll fix your porch, you know, with the stone. It's a stonemason scene with the carpenter, you know, and it's everybody pulls together and cooperates, you know. Except for the bad guy, the bully, you know, he's problematical, you know.
Louis,
yeah. But it's American know-how.
Okay.
Comes through finally, and at the end, you know, there is this Eisensteinian Soviet realism sort of an ending, you know, which is like the high point of the film, when everybody pulls together and they're kind of machine-like, and there's a tempo to the whole scene.
Well, yes, indeed.
You know, and everybody shows that if we all act like a machine, which is sort of, you know, like a early Soviet. Eisenstein saw this when he was over here.
When he was on the Paramount lot.
Yeah. Having his troubles with the U.S. cinema, you know, you can't do that over here, commie. But he liked it because it was derived from some of the films he was shooting, like Strike and October and all the others. But that ending is famous, and it's wonderful the way it's shot, you know, with the low angle. The camera's down at their legs.
Absolutely.
As the pickaxes come down, you know, in the syncopated style. And that's sort of a Soviet thing there, with everybody triumphing over the adversities there.
Absolutely.
And also triumphing over the machine. They turn into a
machine.
Yeah,
no, absolutely. And they have their, you know, selected boss, but the emphasis is not upon him as, you know, he's put them in rhythm and formed them as such. And so you're absolutely correct that the visual emphasis is upon that group working. And I would point out that in that the sequence is long. And gloriously so. Again, coming back to this issue of how people are thinking about what you do with sound, etc. That first half of that sequence has no movie music in it. It has no, as we call it, extra diegetic music, stuff from outside of the story world. And just to kind of emphasize your point, there is this rhythmic play that is certainly the forms of their body and these geometric shapes that they form, but also it's rhythmically the sound.
The sound is made by the pickaxes.
Absolutely, absolutely the case. And again, that's something when he first shows up on the farm, it seems a little bit extended, the degree to which King Vidor places so much attention on his frustration in trying to put the shovel into the ground as the single man.
right.
And then obviously, knowledgeable spectators that we are, we get the payoff.
Yeah.
You know, we go from the frustrated man who can barely break soil to this incredibly effective cooperative that can celebrate and bring life again to the land.
There's a nice moment when Chris notices the fact that the soil is so dry.
Yeah.
And John is having trouble, you know. If you add water, it's like chocolate cake. So you've got food and conquest over the land, you know, the common sense of the plain, ordinary immigrant.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
He's got the heavy Swedish accent,
Right.
and he brings the European know-how. It's wonderful.
And his wife makes a terrific rabbit stew.
Yeah. In contrast to the emaciated chicken that John buys back at the pawn shop, and I think, is that an ice box or a plain cabinet? Because this chicken comes out of there, and you think, this is really disgusting, you know.
Well, but I think you're pointing out something, you know, very significant in the way in which somebody like King Vidor, who is a, you know, veteran, highly regarded filmmaker, you know, with 15 years of experience now. I mean, he knows exactly when he's writing a script how to set up these kinds of motifs that have a payoff. I mean, and I love the moment in which they're comparing the chicken and the ukulele and their relative value, but also the fact that they kind of look alike. And the deli guy starts playing the ukulele.
There's a funny thing about that, because there's a room in the film for culture.
Yes.
Because
good point.
the violinist says, I can play the violin, my hands are strong for the violin. And you think, well, he's not going to have a job in the commune here. But he teaches people the violin. You know,
correct.
That's his contribution. So it's, you know, Vidor suggesting that even in these, you know, dire times, there's need for culture of some kind, you know, or other.
And that's also part, I couldn't agree with you more, but that's also part of John's education, because when he's making the initial selection, he's a little bit, you know,
crude,
crude and prompt to that. And then it's when people come and start appealing to him in that kind of second argument. I mean, the second argument made by the violinist, as you pointed out, or also, you know, the fellow, I think it is Cohen, who says, no, my wife is pregnant. I have to have a job. And so all of a sudden, John shows, oops, my empathy, disappeared for a while. I should really be listening in this way and trying to problem solve with this fellow.
Yeah, for sure. There's been a long argument as to the actual politics of this movie.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
It's in the Great Depression. It answers to some of the concerns of FDR, things he's trying to implement in the national government. But when it comes down to it, it's not a socialist film. It's not a Stalinist film. It's not a populist film, I think. But it's about the great man. Yeah. It's about John. And if he will grow up, mature, learn something concerning farming, learn something concerning being a husband,
Correct.
And at the end, he's on the wagon, the corn wagon, whatever it is.
With the harvest.
With the harvest, with his wife, back together again. The tramp is gone. Everything is settled. And it's because John has grown up and grown into... There's a scene back at the campfire when they're talking about what government shall we have,
Right.
It's like a Trumbull painting, with Madison and all the others around. And a person says, I want a socialist government, and that's kind of okay. I want a democratic government, and then go, no.
Yeah.
But then Chris says, as long as I can't do this accent, John, as long as John is in charge of it, we'll be okay, you know. And so it's the American idea that we have to have John Wayne come in and save the day, you know. And here it's like this boy man,
Well, correct,
who needs to get a little bit wiser, and he saves the day.
I'm in agreement with that point. I'm going to push it in a slightly different direction because I think the film, you know, plays with being realistic and shooting on location, having, you know, in that sense of authenticity, you know, about it. But at the same time, I think it's this, you know, it's also this allegorical film about the possible rebirth of America and how that can work. And it is this vision, just as you said, of a John who has to go back to his origins. I mean, they open that house, they go in the house, and the house is this kind of ruin. And you want to say, okay, this is a farmhouse, this is a ruin, but this is also a metaphoric house, clearly, because this is everything that everybody, this is what America is right now.
Yeah.
It's a ruin in this way. And she begins picking up the trash. I mean, they almost in a Lord of Flies kind of way, that they have to cook their meal through the fireplace because nothing is functional. And then you know, as he matures as the leader with his, you know, with his temptations, his ups and downs, we see the birth of the community, and that, you know, the way in which all of a sudden the big house hasn't fully repaired, but all of a sudden there are these neat, or you could almost call them peasant cottages, that everybody has that, and the scenes of, you know, people saying hello to one another in the morning, and this creation of a village.
They do create civilization in the wilderness, you know, and it's an optimistic film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Finally, I mean, of all of the films of that era, it says we can triumph over this terrible crisis. Certainly, it's unlike The Grapes of Wrath by John Ford,
Right,
which has its romance to it, but that is a much more downbeat film, which John Ford finally hated. But the ending with Tom Joad, who is the savior figure,
right,
takes off, you know, alone on the horizon line. That's really frightening, or downbeat anyway.
Well, no, and just to follow up your point just for 1 second, and it is he is leaving alone. He is rejected. The road has not turned in, you know, for him at least, it has turned into it. So the road is still this challenge at the end of this film, whereas there's a communal. The final images here are of, as you pointed out, are of community and of the reunited, the fully formed family couple.
And, you know, it's got some great shots of the land, too, like that famous shot fairly early on showing Mary staring out at the plain,
Absolutely,
which has just been plowed. And there's a sense of possibility, especially since she is in the foreground, you know. And she gives a kind of blessing to the project, you know, of this soon to be revived golden land, you know. So it's a heartening film, but there's also a moment in it that shows it as a post-code film.
right.
It's often talked about. It's not an insight particularly, when the two of them are just inside of the shack,
Right.
know, on separate mattresses,
Right, absolutely.
wide apart,
Right.
you know, as far apart as Thalberg could possibly want, or the code people rather. And then there's thunder, you know, the ominousness of the atmosphere. And John, you know, jumps out and shoves his mattress over by her, you know, and I guess she's happy now. So there's a sense that the marriage is not in great shape, and it'll be further threatened by Sally, the bombshell.
Well, I think you bring up an excellent point there, because also it is a film that at different points in the story is punctuated by deaths and births. There's the death of of Sally's old man, as it were. There's the Cohen, and then there's the, in a certain sense, conspicuous fact that our protagonist couple are at this point childless.
Yeah.
And that seems to be part of, the barrenness of the city itself. So I think at that final shot, it's almost as if you want to say, and the next step will be next year there will be a junior who will be with the harvest.
That's the funny thing, because it is childless throughout, and you would think in the final image of the two of them on the hay wagon, that she'd be holding, but no, it's a sense that, well, there's possibility there, but it's only possibility. It seems better now, and certainly she is the center of gravity to ensure the possibility of change. But it's not absolute.
Okay, we're going to have to end on the not absolute, because we've run out of time. I hope you've enjoyed our discussion here of Our Daily Bread. If you'd like to know more about City Cinematheque, or more generally about CUNY TV, there's a way to do so. Go to our website, www.tv.cuny.edu. You'll find there the films we're going to be screening. You can communicate with us by email, and you'll see all of the other extraordinary programming we try to offer to you here on CUNY TV. Chris, thanks for a really rich discussion, bringing decades of your thinking about American culture and movies on the show for us. Always a pleasure to chat with you, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us here today, and please join us again in coming weeks as we continue our stroll through the archives of film history. It's bye for now.